Hi, today I'm here with Jazz Hampton, who's running for mayor. Welcome, Jazz.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So why don't we start with if you could just tell me what motivated you to run for mayor and why now?
Yeah, I've grown up in a situation. I always tell stories about my parents. They were always doing things so proactively to help in the community. When I was growing up, I grew up within 7 miles of wherever I'm sitting in Minneapolis. I've lived there for my entire life in within that 7 mile circle, and I wanted to bring that to whatever I do in life. And I have in a litany of different aspects of my career in the past. But what I've seen in Minneapolis recently is a cycle of gridlock and tension that prevents us from moving forward. I feel like I'm watching a tire spinning in the snow over and over again. And we've all seen that. And if you don't put something under that tire, if you don't inject something new, then the fear is that it's just going to continue doing that. And frankly, I saw this as a great opportunity in a city that seems, as all Democratic leadership, to be so divided. It seems like we could really use from someone stepping into to the tension that exists and saying, I can live in this tension, I can bridge the gap, especially with a history of doing that kind of work in the past. And so I started considering it over the course of last summer of 24, talking with my wife and our three children and our extended families about it. But ultimately, we knew that this opportunity to put Minneapolis back on track to being what we know that it can be, which is an optimistic vision of safety and opportunity and places to live and educate and grow a family. And that's what we're pushing for. And that's what the campaign is all about. And that's why I joined the race.
So, what would you attribute kind of I think you called it gridlock and the tires spinning? Is it new for the city? And if so, like what's causing it?
Yeah, I think whether we're talking about city politics or federal politics, there is a divide that has been growing again across the political spectrum. And I think that's, of course, true in Minneapolis as well. But what I feel is one of the biggest issues we have is folks aren't even coming to the table anymore. Whether I'm talking about my history as a litigator or my history in teaching or in so many different places, you have to sit at the table with people that disagree with your viewpoint. And it's so funny, we care so much about diversity, and I do deeply. And a part of that is diversity of thought. If you have a monolith across the entire political spectrum, then likely the results will not be as good as they could be if we didn't have more diverse opinions at the table. So frankly, and I've sat down with current city council members, ones that I disagree with politically in the last 3 months. And when I sit down with them, I say, listen, we have differing views on X, Y, and Z, and that's okay, because what I'm promising you is I'll come to the table and we will work through a solution together. And frankly, that's what from the feedback that I've received from them, is that's what they're hoping for. They are not hoping for someone that is ideologically perfectly aligned with them. They're hoping for someone that will have bi-weekly meetings with them one-on-one, someone who will talk about the issues of their constituents who in some cases have voted them in time and time again, even if you disagree with some of the specific tactics, because what I don't think any of us disagree on are some of the issues, right? No one's going to say that affordable housing is an issue. No one's going to say that public safety isn't an issue. No one's going to say that the economic vitality of the city is in the best place that it can be. Everyone's website is going to list very similar problems, but how are we addressing them different than what we have been in the last 8 years?
Right. So I want to get, more into like your background and things like that, but it seems crazy not to just talk a little bit about what just happened with the recent assassinations. And I'm just curious, has it changed your thinking about this race at all? Or maybe are you taking more security measures? Like how has it impacted what's going on?
Yeah, I think the first thing I have to say is no one has been impacted as much as those families that were a part of this tragedy. And so my heart and prayers go out to them. But to the question about, and beyond the people directly, but physically impacted and their families, there's also people on this list that we're hearing so much about that are emotionally impacted. There's people in various rings of proximity to the core of what happened. And so I don't want to attribute that I'm anywhere in those rings. What I do believe, though, is I read a message from the children of two of the victims. And the message that I read today was the best way to honor my parents is to go forward and do the work, whether it's a small piece or a bigger piece. And listen, that's what we have to do. And I take those words that they said very seriously. And I think it's beautiful that in an
Yeah, that's a
incredibly
great
difficult
message.
time they can
Yeah.
say that. But listen, I would be lying if I didn't say my wife is more nervous today than she was a week ago,
Yeah.
or that my 3 children, we had to actively shield them from some of this because they're 7-year-old, 5-year-old, and 3-year-old. And I don't think developmentally they're ready for that conversation. Or I don't want to put a fear into their hearts that shouldn't be there. But listen, I think whether we're talking about people breaking into houses, or we're talking about people being rude in Target stores when you're out and about as a public official, I think going into it, you have to know that is going to be a part of it. Obviously, this is a way more extreme version of that is scary and unsettling. But I think even the words of the children that I read earlier today hardened my desire to be a part of a solution where we can actually bridge the gap and get people around a table to have a real conversation.
Yeah, and I would add to that. I mean, personally, I feel uncomfortable with them publishing the list of all the people who were on it.
Yeah.
And I think some versions of them might have had addresses, and it's part of the public record, I guess, to have someone's address. But like I read this morning, apparently this guy must have used like a broker or something to get their addresses. But I don't know. I hope they rethink publishing the addresses, and like maybe allowing for more privacy of candidates. I'm not sure what the reasoning was for having that, other than if they want to verify that you live in the city or the district that you say you do. But still seems like the officials could verify that and not necessarily have it out in public.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. I mean, it's unsettling. And, I can't tell you how many times people are now saying, oh, don't post that picture of you and your family because the numbers of your house, you're standing in front of your house are present, right? You have to think about all of that stuff all the time. It is a different landscape and world that we live in, whether it's acts of violence or and I also get that people want to go and protest, and sometimes that's at that official's house or whatever the case may be. I mean, I had to call and tell my neighbors that I was running for mayor because I was like, I just want you to be aware of what your neighbor is doing and how that changes even how you think about the situation.
Well, I hope the situation kind of makes everyone think twice a little bit about their rhetoric and whatnot. I mean, although, I mean, I don't know that I'm not trying to say that that's the cause, right? Yeah, like this guy's obviously has some real mental problems, but, it should, I hope, make people kind of like what you're talking about, a little bit more willing to sit down and, with others that they maybe disagree with, and ways that are constructive instead of pushing people to more extremes.
Even before I entered into the political space, I have always shied away from using. I work my hardest to not use really hyperbolic language or things that are too inflammatory, because frankly, I want to say those words for when I believe it is truly that egregious or something like that is happening. But I think it gives everyone an opportunity to take a step back and say, rather than labeling everything and everyone with a word that is going to inflame folks or maybe create a divide, let's like sit down and have a conversation. But I think that also comes from my background and where I've come in life and what brought me to kind of navigate the world that way.
Well, let's talk about your background a little bit, because you're a business person, right? And this is your first foray into public life. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So maybe what are the lessons that you've learned from business or personally that you think makes you like qualified to be the mayor of the city?
Yeah. So I think that the starting point is we exist in a strong mayor system. Some people are hesitant to say it's like the CEO of the city because people don't love CEOs of large corporations as much nowadays. But what they mean when they say that is you are the managerial lead. You are the point person. You are the team captain, whatever the case may be. I've spent 5 years building a business, starting in Northeast Minneapolis, that's now nationwide, that serves hundreds of thousands of people every day, and is not just serving them in a, we aren't selling coffee mugs. We're providing attorneys when they are being pulled over to de-escalate the interaction, ensure everyone gets home safely. It's not just a lovely area. It's not just a good thought. It's a deeply profound mission.
And what was the kind of motivation behind starting that?
Yeah, so it was the tragic loss of George Floyd, right? My undergrad is in computer science.
Okay.
And then when I was working at 3M in their web development group as a summer intern before my senior year of college, and I remember I came home and I sat down in my college house with the 6 other football guys from the University of St. Thomas, and I said, I can't do this for the rest of my life. I love technology, but I can't stay in this world forever. I'm too extroverted. And so I applied to law school that summer. And I went to law school. When I was in law school, I was a public defender. You can start doing that when you're still a student. And then I went and I was a corporate law litigator for 8 years. I learned how to use the law and how to wield it in a way that can help people and push things forward, and how to just be a good practicing attorney. Mm-hmm. So I did that for 8 years. And then after George Floyd was killed, I received a call from 2 folks that I knew from college, and they said, Jazz, we're thinking about building a platform, an app that connects drivers to an attorney on a video call instantly when they're pulled over. And you have a computer science degree and you're a lawyer. And one of them was a financial accounting and financial background. The other was a tech sales background. And as 3 Black men, could we come together to build something in this city that can help starting here and then the world? And that's what brought us to building in that moment. But what the other part that people don't understand, and this is to bridging the gap, the very first person I called when I was considering leaving my corporate law job before I made partner or was up for partner next year, the first person I called was my brother, who's a Black man that was graduating from Alexandria Tech's law enforcement program. And I said, what can we do when you pull up to a car and your lights are on and you see them to make you feel safer in this moment? Because de-escalation means everyone is feeling safer in this moment. Yeah. And how do we, not only how do we build something that can effectuate that, but how do we then go and convey that message to law enforcement across the country, which is what we did next. So that building something, the managerial skills, the leading a team. Now we have, with contractors and employees in total, over 300 folks doing this work every day across the country. Building this is the leadership skills that someone in a strong mayor system has to have as well. Because guess what? You're hiring for all of these departments, and you're the boss of those departments. You're ensuring that everyone's hitting their KPIs and their metrics and doing the job really well. You're managing a budget. Not only do I myself and my co-founder manage our budget, I now teach entrepreneurial finance to students to teach them how to manage budgets for the businesses that they're growing and building at the University of St. Thomas. These are the skills. So it's, frankly, I get I'm a little miffed when people say you've never held elected office before. What makes you qualified? That stuff alone, I think, does. On top of being a lawyer for 8 years, on top of being on the Catholic Charities Board for 5 years, ensuring that we're addressing affordable housing, on top of being a part of the Great North Innocence Project's board and representing a wrongfully incarcerated person successfully after he spent 19 years in jail, on top of being part of the Minneapolis Foundation Board, ensuring that we're spending philanthropic dollars in the right way. In fact, I would argue that this is the exact kind of resume, not someone, and this is no shade, as the kids say, at anyone else who this was their path, but if you have that resume compared to someone who maybe graduated from an MBA program and then became a city council member in their late 20s and then ran for mayor 6 years later, I think this body of experience is what the city needs in this moment, and why a part of the reason I wanted to step into this space.
No, that's a great point. Certainly, I've heard a lot of people criticize other members of the city council, in particular, that they don't have a well-rounded world experience or view, that they, kind of gone from college to maybe being a policy aide, and it does seem like a lot of people are interested in seeing someone that will listen to business and understand business. I mean, not necessarily be completely dominated by the business interests, but you have to recognize that businesses help keep the city moving,
And
So
that's one of the three pillars of the work that we talk about within this campaign, that economic vitality is incredibly important to a city where elderly folks are getting priced out of their house on taxes alone, where people are struggling to stay. And if downtown and uptown and 38th and Grand aren't successful business corridors, then that's going to reflect on the taxes and what happens to the constituents. And yeah, I think the other part, and I think this is a national problem too, listen, Democrats we're so good at saying we need this system because it's keeping everyone honest and doing things right, and this system is sacred.
so maybe you could just say, what do you mean by this system? What are you talking about?
Thank you for asking for this. The safety protocols around building a coffee shop in Minneapolis. Here are the permits you have to pull. Here are the records you're going to have. Here are the inspections. That system is necessary because it keeps people safe. It ensures the business doesn't burn down when people are inside of it. It ensures that it's going to be a healthy environment to make food. All of these things, and we defend these types of institutions because this is what's keeping us safe for a lot of our folks. But we struggle to say, but it could improve a little bit.
Yes,
and there's this fear of saying if you acknowledge that there's something wrong with the system, even on a small level, that I'm saying that we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that whether we're talking about permitting for building a new coffee shop or our police department, I just don't believe in that. If it can fit on a bumper sticker, it's not good policy. It takes a nuanced conversation and sitting down with people, including people that you don't agree with, to get to how you can improve that system. And I think in Minneapolis, that's very true, and especially in the business community.
There's a book out called Why Nothing Matters, and I've tried to, and I'll keep bugging him to try and get the author to come on, but he does a great job of kind of breaking down a lot of our problems in terms of sort of whether we have a strong mayor hierarchy versus like how do you balance that with the voice of all these different groups and kind of one of the examples he gives is about regulation and how we want to listen to everyone and make sure everything is accommodated, but that it can and has made it very difficult to get big projects done. But I that's just a very cursory explanation, but it's a good book, Why Nothing Works. I want to go back to, you mentioned what are the priorities of your campaign. If you could just kind of really spell out, like, what are those top three takeaways that people should know about you and your campaign that you're prioritizing?
Yeah. The three that I would list off, first is public safety. The second is affordable housing. And then third is economic vitality within our city. And that is both for businesses and the individuals they employ, right? And if I'm talking about the first one, which I think is a hot button issue for a lot of folks, this is very specific to me. Obviously, I built a platform around interactions with law enforcement and my brother graduating from Alexandria Tech's program. And this is what I believe to be true. The list of things that we ask police officers to do is too long. I don't believe that. That's what they tell me. And we need to reduce that list. If I'm making up numbers, if it's 50 things we ask them to do, we need to reduce that down to 22 things. And hopefully allocate those things directly to another individual or individuals that can do that work. Because with this reduced list, we will reduce the amount of stress that we're putting on these individuals. We will increase the amount of people who are more likely to come and work within our police department. And we can do a better job answering those 22 things compared to the 50 things. My car has been stolen from in front of my house multiple times since we moved there several years ago. This is no joke. 2 nights ago, someone came, opened our garage, and stole our electric bike out of our house. Those crimes, like, no one was, the level of solving them was not what we hope they are, right?
Yeah.
And I want to be really clear about this. This is not a knock on police officers. I think there's countless individuals that are working really hard within the department, but we're asking them to do too many things and we don't have enough. At the same time.
So when you say we don't have enough, like, what would be enough, do you think? I mean, is it getting to the city's mandated amount, which I think we're 200 some odd below, or what to you would be enough? What's the right ratio?
I can definitely say what we have now is not enough. Whether it's the amount within the charter or putting ourselves on par per capita, like other cities of our similar size, officer to citizen ratio. I think that is what we need to work towards. But also, it's not just the numbers, it's the results. Are we solving the crimes? Are people feeling safer? Are those things dropping? And I don't just mean murder or shootings. I mean crimes writ large. So I think that is what we have to do. So I want to be really clear. That is incredibly important. We have to make their jobs less stressful and ask them to do less, and hopefully and specifically get more officers at the same time. And I really want to be clear about this. My security alarm went off at our house and my wife was out of town. And I didn't remember the password, and they said we're going to dispatch police then. And so I grabbed my phone, I hung up, and I called my wife and I said, I'm too scared of them seeing my black body on my front porch when they arrive. So I'm going to run down the basement and hide. Both of those things are true. Like, I'm super disappointed that the car thefts are happening and that my wife doesn't feel safe walking to her car to go to yoga at 6 a.m. without me looking out of the window. And also, I'm nervous when a police officer is approaching my house and responding to something. And to pretend like only one of those exists is wild to me. And they both exist, and we have to address both of them. When I was sitting in my barbershop on the north side of Minneapolis, my barber said, I only see police officers when they're pulling cars over, when they're driving past. Why don't they come in here and get to know me as a community barbershop owner here in the city? And then what's ironic, and this is getting feedback from the community and why it's valuable, the person in the chair next to me said, yeah, but I feel uncomfortable with them coming in here with a gun. Mm-hmm. They're like, maybe if they come in just wearing an MPD shirt without a belt on while they're working and getting to know us. And of course, then we talk about enough officers living within the city, etc. That's the foundational trust that we have to build in order for people even to say that we need more or want more. And those things have to go hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, whenever it's someone walks into a room and they have a gun, it definitely changes the dynamic, the feel. And so I can understand someone not wanting while they're getting their haircut.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not around them a lot but maybe, are there any examples of things you think that the city's doing right at this time for reducing crime? From what I hear, the whole behavioral crisis center has been a big boon, although it confused me why I think it got moved into the fire department. So that's one. And then, of course, Amanda Harrington is now in charge of neighborhood safety department. She's going to be, I'm going to be interviewing her next week. What are some of the things in your mind have been done right for helping the city?
Yeah, I think it has to be an ecosystem. And so when I talk about reducing from 50 things to 22 things, those other things don't disappear. We have to reallocate it to different people, whether it's behavioral health specialists or social workers or other folks. And I think that the start of that work is important. Mm-hmm. And I guess my analogy would kind of be like Obamacare. Like, I'm so glad that 30 million people were able to get health insurance, but I'm not going to pretend like the product and the process was perfect, right? But again, that goes back to the thing of, these is an institution, we defend it, we improve it, right? And so yes, having behavioral health resources and others are helpful, and it's step in the right direction. I'm very happy that we've done that. But beyond that, as a business owner and who looks at operations really specifically and directly, I think, how can we make it better? I've talked to so many people. A good example of this is they said, we had someone that, to us, a whole bunch of neighbors on a text thread, looked like they're having a mental health episode in an alley. Mm-hmm. And they were like, but we didn't want to call 911 and have police come, and if something bad happened to that individual, we felt like it was our fault. And what I wish they would have known is, oh yeah, it's 911, but they have different routing systems to others. And so my first thought as a business owner and someone who does operations is, what is the different number that we can put in place? Mm-hmm. Where the person feels comfortable calling 711 or 811 and they feel safer about making that call.
Yeah, I don't know if 311 is the right way to go, but
when our house was broken into, our garage, a couple of days ago, I went to the non-emergency line. It's another good example of the opportunities that we have in the city. I went online and I found the non-emergency line. It was, 612 something. It was a full 10-digit number. And then as soon as I pressed call, it said, thank you for calling 311. I was like, oh, okay, I guess the non-emergency line is 311, and they're closed. Like, they just aren't open.
Wow.
They have very minute
Hours.
hours.
Okay.
And so then I ended up calling 911 and they said, "We'll send someone out," and no one ever came. Right. And so these are the operational inefficiencies that we could improve on within the city.
I like what you said earlier that two things can be true, right? That you could be uh, worried about your wife going to the car for yoga and also about how, you're going to be received when the
Yeah.
police show up. And I think, that's it seems to me like a really valid point because it often seems like there's just two camps. It's like one or the other, and both those things can be true. And another part of what's come out of the killing of the Hortman family and shooting of the Hoffman family, um, is this idea that they have to send two officers to the door, right? This
Yep.
person was one, and so uh, I don't know. I don't know what the current protocol is or if that's going to change. But anyway, there certainly will be a lot of review
Yeah.
at this point as to what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about the second one on your list there, affordable housing. So, I mean, that's been discussed for a decade in the city. It seems like there's some real economic currents that are making it difficult to get more affordable housing, interest rates, the cost of construction, all those sorts of things. I mean, we have the 2040 plan. What more can Minneapolis do to encourage affordable housing? Like, what is your plan to increase the availability of it?
Yeah. I think, first of all, incentives have always done well, and we need to look at what kind of incentives we can provide to folks to do things that could help. A good example of that is if someone's putting up a very tall residential building and everything is one bedroom or alcove, because it maximizes the dollars that individual builder can have. That is not helpful to a lot of the housing crisis that we're experiencing in the city. So many other cities, and not just outside of Minnesota, within Minnesota as well, multi-generational or larger families have to live not in a home. It can sometimes be an apartment building. If we can ensure that these builders are also putting 2 and 3 bedroom units in, that is incredibly important to the housing crisis we have. And then it's not just one new additional house. It's one building with multiple places that can house a family rather than single individuals.
That's actually one of the reasons we moved out here from the New York area, was because we were having a second kid and finding a 2 bedroom apartment was really, really difficult. Finding a place to have, 2 kids in an apartment was a challenge.
Yeah.
Now, is that similar? I mean, that's an apartment, but I've also heard this idea of more like cooperative houses where you would have maybe an extended family in one house or maybe even multiple families in a house. Is that part of the plan too, or is that something different?
I don't know if you ever looked at ADUs, which are additional units you can either put in the back or above a garage or even in a basement in some certain situations. I was just talking to a family where mom and son owned a townhome together, and they're on each side, and they added an ADU so they could expand the family that was present there. That is a really great way to make it happen. Frankly, if we could do that at my own house, my in-laws would be more than welcome to move into our house if they could. But we don't. The restrictions and the difficulty of doing that work is too high right now. Another opportunity for us to improve what we can do in that space. And it's not just, we hear so much about deeply affordable housing, and I do think we need to partner and have housing first solutions with wraparound services directly in proximity there. That is very important. But it's so much more than just that. It's the people that are making what in Minneapolis would be, 30 to 70 or 80% average income of someone in Minneapolis. Those folks are really struggling to find homes as well. So it's our places to live. So it is also about, that is a part of the affordable housing conversation, not just encampments and individuals that are in deep affordable housing needs.
Yeah, it always seems like it's made out to be a kind of a little bit of a battle between renters versus home ownership. And I think one of the, to me, the elements of the 2040 plan that I didn't feel like was going to produce a lot of housing was this idea that like if you own a home, you could turn it into like a triplex and rent it out. And I just didn't see a lot of people doing that because they live in that house because they want to live in a
Yep.
single family home. And but so I don't know what your thoughts are and how do you balance those, because you people build wealth through home ownership, obviously, in a way they don't necessarily with apartments or renting. But another part of the construction uh, philosophy is to build it in certain corridors or high density around like bus stops and things like that, public transportation. Any thoughts on those?
Yeah, I think access to public transportation is going to be really important to a lot of folks. I think when we're talking about building, whether it's apartment buildings or multi-family dwellings or houses, I think those are two separate things. I think, the building in proximity to our transit system that we continue to build out more and more, it only makes sense. But the fact of the matter is, if we're doing it in the right way and our transit building is on schedule with what we've hoped to do within the city, everywhere should be relatively close to those
Mm-hmm.
corridors. There shouldn't be a bus stop too far away for that you have to walk too far for. There shouldn't be a place where there's not a bike lane for you if you live in South Minneapolis and you want to head into downtown for work. We've built a lot of that infrastructure to make it so you can build anywhere and still feel like you're in proximity to those places. We're one of the most bikeable cities in America, and it's because we've built a lot of infrastructure around that.
And your third point was economic vitality. So
Great memory.
a lot of businesses have closed, particularly we're in uptown area. It's been hit hard. I was just reading about again, so many articles about the commercial properties downtown. So what role does the mayor play in spurning or creating economic vitality, and how would you reach out to businesses to help them out, to kind of bring them back here, or at least make them feel this is the place they want to be?
Yeah. I think, that my vision for Minneapolis from this perspective, and everyone will talk about uptown and downtown, and I think they're important business corridors. But for all of Minneapolis, my vision is what is happening in the North Loop. When I was growing up, that was called the Warehouse District. It didn't have a cool name. And now I have friends, they live there, they work there, they go to coffee shops and restaurants there, they walk their dog there. It is a community unto itself where you can do anything. The furthest you have to go is to a grocery store, which is across the bridge a little more into downtown on Hennepin.
Yeah, I mean, when I go out to eat there or go visit, it feels like a very different world
Yeah.
than uptown or South Minneapolis. So,
And so my vision from an economic perspective is that it's almost like competitive boroughs in New York, where it's like, no, Brooklyn's better than Manhattan because X. We have more green space. Our restaurants are better. Our food is more authentic because we have an authentic Mexican restaurant, or a Somali family has moved in and built a really incredible East African restaurant, right? It doesn't have to be copies of North Loop. It has to be representative communities that are competing with the North Loop. I want people in Mill City to say, no, this is better. We love it over here. This in a fun way, obviously, right? And that is what we have to do, and to lean into the communities that already exist there to build up that vibrant ecosystem. So how do you do that tactically? You have to incentivize the restaurants, the coffee shops, the businesses to not only be there and stay there, but to employ folks from that community in a meaningful and positive way. We've seen the tension, especially in the restaurant industry, between the employees and the owners growing so much. Where, I grew up, my mom owned a restaurant when I was growing up. It was her dad's restaurant that he passed on to her in Richfield. And it was pride that the community was able to be employed by someone who lived down the road, and the kids that were in the high school would come after school and work at the restaurant. And it was a community space, not only to go and eat, but to work at and be a part of. We have to get back to that a little bit in the city of Minneapolis too.
So is when you say incentives though, is it tax breaks for businesses or like subsidizing rent or what is it? What's the incentive? I mean, a lot of people would say people are deterred from going out because of crime. I mean, how do you I mean, it's a mix of things, I'm sure, but what's the, Jazz plan for helping to incentivize business? And, those are what you're kind of talking about are also the smaller ones, which are so important to like feeling a sense of place and vitality in the neighborhood. But it is a big problem that we are losing so many tenants downtown. I mean, that is a huge tax hit.
Yeah.
So, what's the balance there between say helping the smaller businesses and trying to keep downtown alive?
Yeah. I'm gonna say something that I feel like candidates for mayor of Minneapolis or for elected office in Minneapolis don't say too often.
Okay.
But I'm gonna say it. We are in a world of hurt if Target and US Bank leave downtown Minneapolis.
Yeah.
It will hurt bad. And we have to be at the table with these folks to understand what they need or what they're hoping to see to ensure they don't go to Wyzetta or somewhere down 394 or 94 in either direction. That I want to be unequivocal. That has to be a part of the conversation. I'm a part of all the chambers. I'm going to all of the things to say we need to make sure that we're doing the things in Minneapolis to ensure that that does not happen. I'm not going to go extreme and say no taxes for someone or something like that, but we have to understand the needs of those businesses. So let me say that first. The second is the incentives, whether we're talking about small businesses and restaurants and others. What I am told already is it can start as early as, Jazz, it would take us 6 months to build this restaurant or this coffee shop out. And it took 8 to 12 because of the permitting and the waiting for inspections and these issues that we're having. Not only are they looking for a more trusting central hub where they can call and say, so the plumbing permit has to come after the electrical, and when can I have the inspections? Not only a hub where they can rely on that more consistently, but also cutting down the times of these processes is going to be incredibly important. Because what I know as a professor of finance is if you have enough money to build a restaurant out in 6 months and you have to stretch it to 12 or 8 or 12 or 10 months, the likelihood of that place succeeding plummets.
Right.
You aren't going to be successful. And guess what? People aren't waiting till they're 10 months in the permitting process to learn this. They say, I've heard the fears and the worries, so I'm not even going to try. I'm not going to try building the restaurant in Minneapolis because I know that if I think it'll take 6 months, it'll take 18 and they won't be successful. So we have to do the things to prevent people from having that fear in the first place and then letting that cascade and grow. Because what we've seen is if people are successful in the space in Minneapolis, they keep doing it, right? Gavin has however many restaurants. Ann Kim had however many, one of which is just now closing for what I hear or understand to be rent-related issues. We have to ensure that they aren't fearful of doing the work here at a minimum. That is an incentive, right? That is the work that we have to do in Minneapolis. And then specifically to downtown, I don't think we should turn the IDS center into apartments. What I do think is residential from outside in is the opportunity we have in Minneapolis. I used to live
I'm not sure I understand what that means.
Oh, I mean, literally geographically from the outside of downtown is where you have to start. A great example, I lived on 929 Portland Avenue, which is a building called Skyscape. We rented a condo in that building. And it was above a CVS, and there was a coffee shop across the way, and we had a 1-room plus den. That's where my wife and I, we were married when we lived there. We had a dog and our first daughter in that building. But then the CVS closed, the coffee shop closed, and we had to walk so far to get the everyday necessities that we wanted to attain. And so we moved out, right? And if those things are present, we might still be present in that building, at least in a different unit because we loved the building, and wouldn't feel like we had to leave.
Why do you think those things close? Like what's driving businesses out now? I mean, it's more than permitting, I think, although that seems like a logical issue to focus on.
Oh yeah, permitting and building is one piece of the larger mosaic for sure. One of them is crime. I know firsthand when I was in that CVS, people would walk in, and CVS had a no stopping policy. People would walk in and just fill up bags with stuff and walk out of the door.
Right.
Crime is I think all of these topics are interconnected, right? If we have less crime, more businesses will stay around. If we have more businesses, more people have jobs and aren't experiencing being unhoused in any given moment, right? These are all connected. And if we aren't able to bolster the public safety in that moment, people won't want to be there, and they'll be less likely to open and continue building a business there. If you're worried that your window of your restaurant is going to be broken and your insurance rates are going to keep going up, yeah, I think crime is a portion of it. I think there is a chicken and egg too, right? Well, if people are leaving this skyscape building because there's no CVS, do we have to get a CVS in there to get more people in the building? And if they, and why would I go into a building or go into a neighborhood if there's no one living there? And so we have to build them at the same time, which is difficult, but it's what needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, that's the chicken and the egg thing is definitely a hard one to address, right? Because I've heard that not talked about with particularly with Uptown, like we need foot traffic, but until we have the businesses, we aren't going to have more foot traffic, and the businesses aren't going to come until there's foot traffic. Yeah. And so that is a tough one. So let's kind of move into more of a fun type topic to give people just a better understanding of who you are. Like what's something about you, whether it's hobbies or personal interests or community involvement, that you think would help residents to better understand you?
Yeah. I across life, I like to gather as many differing experiences as possible. And so I think one of the things I take pride is I feel like I can walk into any room and connect with someone on something that they deeply care about. So whether that's working out and being active and running around the lakes, whether it's riding a Harley Davidson motorcycle, which I do, speaking French because I loved taking it and learning that language. Bravo TV, I watch every show. Like, right, in any of these circumstances, I love connecting with people because at the end of the day, and I believe this firmly, and it's why I feel like I'm the person for the moment as well. It's what that allows you to do is once you get to know someone on a personal level, when you have a connection, whether it's loving Real Housewives of Salt Lake City or whether it's riding a Harley Davidson motorcycle, what that does is it dispels the notion that you can strongly dislike this person right off the bat. Listen, I have a brother who lives in Arizona now. He is a Republican, not a MAGA Republican, but like you would say a Ronald Reagan Republican. And he's my best friend, and we talk on the phone 4 times a day. And all day today, we talked about drawing lines around economic growth and how it can be done really well. And I have that conversation every day. He's my best friend. I love him. Mm-hmm. That's what sets me up to, when I'm having difficult conversations, to not judge someone right away. And I think those hobbies are a good example of finding a way to connect with someone and connect on something you both care about deeply. And it's harder to not get to know that person. My dad is Black and my mom is white. And when my parents got together, my mom's dad, my white grandpa, told my mom he did not support their relationship. Won't support it, full stop. And they were just about to have their first child. And by the time my grandfather, the same grandfather, was on his deathbed, he held my dad's hand and said, "You are just as much a son to me as anyone else that my wife and I gave birth to." Because he got to know my dad. And he got to know him on a personal level, and he got to know the character of that individual. That is the power of getting to know people, meeting them where they are, and finding commonality. And it's impossible to have this kind of disdain for people. I really feel this after this weekend. If you just get to know them. Listen, I do not think in politics we have, especially in the city of Minneapolis, inherently bad people at all. I think we have a lot of people that are representing different constituents that have different hopes for their portion of the city. And it's about bringing people to the table to get to know each other and to get that done really well.
Great. Well, I am curious, why did you choose French? And have you ever gone there to actually test your skills?
The honest answer is
Canada.
The honest answer is the girl I had a crush on in 8th grade was taking French, and so I started taking French.
Totally valid.
Yeah, and then I stuck with it for I took it for all 4 years in high school, and then I also took it in college as well. And yeah, so I've gone to France. My wife and I, we spent our honeymoon. We did Paris, and then we went down to the south of France and did Nice as well. We loved that. It was a really, really great experience. That was, quite some time. So
And so, uh, yeah, I've never been there. It'd be interesting, but it definitely seems like um, there's a certain openness in some of those cultures that you don't necessarily see here
yeah,
towards couples and lifestyles. So I don't
yeah.
know if you experienced any of that or had any.
When I honestly, when I was there, I just felt like, especially in Nice and South France, the South of France, it felt like, um, people were so willing to connect with you as soon as they learned that you were trying a little bit as an outsider. I would speak French a little bit, and they could tell I wasn't a native speaker, but they were like, we appreciate you giving the effort. And then, honestly, they would go out of their way to try to help me in those moments. And I felt that a lot when I was there. And also I just felt like, um, the relaxed nature of
Mhm.
that landscape as well. People were just, they smiled a little more, which was nice to see compared to the hustle and bustle that we kind of can see in the United States.
Well, it's a beautiful story about your grandfather and your father. Thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that. Um, Before we close out, is there any topics that we didn't cover today that you wanted to touch on at all? So,
Yeah, I think again, this is something that isn't said enough. But the disparity in education for Black students and their counterparts in Minneapolis has always been difficult. And it's getting a little better, but it's still, there's huge gaps. And the mayor's office has the ability to raise their hands and say, this isn't our job. This is the school board's job. Um, but listen, those kids are residents of Minneapolis,
mhm.
and those kids are going to grow up and be residents that are voting and contributing economically to our city, and a part of the solutions that we have to build to make our city better. And if we aren't working, even if it isn't quote unquote our job to be a part of that work, because what happens is it's such a difficult conversation that keeping your hands out of it is easier politically. But I believe, especially with how I see myself as mayor of the city, that standing in difficulty, whether it's tension between a city council and the mayor's office, or tension between residents, or tension between folks on a school board, your job is to make the lives of the people of Minneapolis better.
Well, and it's such a good point in terms of potential workers when they are looking at a school to coming here to take a job or start a business, they look at the schools.
Yeah.
So if your schools are not good, people might pass up on the city entirely, and you see people possibly leaving the city if they don't feel like they have
Yep.
good educational opportunities for their kids. And so all those things certainly play a big part in what the sort of atmosphere is of the city and
Absolutely.
the draw of people and businesses that you get. So it's connected.
It's one of the first things people, my business Turn Signal, our app, we offer as an employee benefit. And
Mm-hmm.
it's an employee benefit at Fortune 10 companies and nonprofits. And one of them is Zillow. And I always want to call the people in Zillow and say, hey, can you tell me if it is education the first filter that people use when they're looking at houses on Zillow? Because I know it is. I talked to so many people that, oh, well, I looked at the school system there and X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
And if we aren't building something that is great for everyone, not just for a portion of our residents, then we're failing. And I think, and now listen, I want to be clear. I don't think that the mayor has to come in and commandeer the work that's being done there, but we have to be at the table and we have to be helping in a meaningful way. There's going to be a $75 million plus budget deficit in September for our Minneapolis public school system, and it's gonna hurt, and we have to be addressing that issue, and the city has to be more active in that conversation.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things I don't quite understand totally how the school systems got into such debt, but I'd be curious, and maybe this is a whole nother podcast about your opinions on AI and whether that should be taught in the school or if the city needs to be more prepared for businesses in the future, maybe changing workforces because of it. But we should probably save that for another time. That's
Yeah,
a topic.
yeah. I agree. It is a big topic, and I would love to. But the last thing I'll say before we go is I think there's people listening wondering how they're going to vote or trying to make the decision. And in the city of Minneapolis, we have the opportunity to use ranked choice voting. And I think that is incredibly important.
Well, that actually, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but in New York, it's kind of a big deal because you have the two of the candidates just formed a pack and said, hey, rank us 1 and 2 to try and beat Cuomo, right?
Yep.
I don't know if and you don't have to answer this, but I mean, do you have a strategy? Is there someone that you could see yourself pairing with to say, vote us 1 and 2?
I think all those. The difficult part is right now, as we said, we don't know everyone who is or isn't going to be in the race. We have one candidate.
I'm still waiting for Captain Jack's blacks there.
Yeah, right. Right. So we will always develop and see who's going to saying that, and I'm not opposed to forming those kind of coalitions at all. But what I will say is, what I am against is phrases that discourage people from ranking a specific person. What I actually want, and this is like, and honestly, hopefully everyone's still listening at this point because it's really important. I want people when they go into the booth and they just fill in the circle next to my name, I want them to feel a sense of optimism and hope and excitement. I don't want them to feel like I'm doing this against someone. I want them to see like they're doing for someone. When I did my announcement video, I said, I'm not running against anyone, I'm running for the city. And that's the feeling I want them to have. So it's not about don't rank this person. My belief is rank fully. Give it everything. If your child was applying to colleges, you wouldn't just tell them to apply to one school. You would tell them to apply to them all, and hopefully you can get the one that you wanted the most. But if you don't do it to them all, then you might not go to school next year, right? Yeah. That's how we have to encourage everyone to rank fully. And that's what I really, really believe in. And to that point, don't rank based on who you think is going to win. That's the beauty of ranked choice voting. Vote for who you want to win. And then if there's a backup, it's kind of like a backup school. And hopefully in this case, it's a little risky. And I would, if I'm being generous, I would call myself Harvard. Like, hey, maybe you won't get in. Maybe you don't have the grades. Maybe it isn't going to, maybe it's aspirational. But reach for the aspirational. And then have a safety school and put that second. That is the beauty of ranked choice. And that's how I really hope that we can encourage people to vote in this election cycle in Minneapolis.
Well, just educating people on ranked choice voting is important.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say, because you can knock on people's doors and they don't understand it at all.
And they forgot they did it a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they, there's just still a certain insecurity. But, I think someone in your position is a real opportunity to educate them, like on what you just said, like vote for what you want first.
Yeah.
Right. And and understand that your second choice will be counted. And, I still think there's sort of a gap in trust and knowledge about the process.
Well, I talk to people who have been a part of the caucus process that don't fully understand ranked choice. People who, and I say that to say they're active in this democratic process in our city, and they still don't fully understand the ranked choice system. I think people naturally think that it's like a percentage of your vote. Oh, it doesn't go to the person like a percentage of it. Like, no, the whole thing moves. The whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's a really great opportunity for us to push the city forward and into a new direction that, again, represents the entire city rather than just one dogmatic group that is trying to take just one spot.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.